One of the first things I'd like to talk about is the benefits of robotic floor care or of any autonomous system. One of the first things that comes to mind is a reduction in labor costs or being able to do more with less. Now there's two aspects to that. One is the potential to cut hours or eliminate costs from your bottom line. But the other one is being able to reassign that labor that you would otherwise have spent on floor care to other higher value tasks. Another important factor in another benefit to consider in an autonomous system is consistency. We've run some internal tests and found that an autonomous system can be up to 66% more consistent than a human operator on one of these floor care machines. So that can be a result of several factors. A lot of times it's just how much time an operator has any particular day to devote to floor care. They just may not have the same time every single day to devote to that floor care. And so you'll see large fluctuations in how much coverage they're able to get from day to day, whereas with the autonomous systems, that coverage is going to be a lot more consistent. Another important factor, of course, is safety. Again, we've run tests relating to stopping distance and reaction times. If for example, there's an unexpected obstacle or person in the way, we found that some of these autonomous technologies can stop within half the distance of a human operator. And again, that's due to mainly to reaction time. So these robotic systems are going to be much quicker at reacting to unforeseen obstacles in the way. And finally, there's an increase in accountability. You're going to want to look for something that provides some level of reporting, because that's really going to give you a way to prove compliance to your goals. You're not going to have to rely on somebody's word that that something got done. You can actually point to a report and show that that it actually did get done. The next thing I'd like to talk about is how to calculate ROI. Now, a lot of times, floor care doesn't usually represent 100% of the workload for a particular employee, but the task is often significant enough that it still justifies a savings. But in order to begin to quantify that savings, we really need to think about the total cost of ownership. Now, that's not just the cost of the equipment, but it's the cost of the labor to operate that equipment. So depending on how long the equipment is kept, whether it's three to 5 years, you're going to want to look at what your cost of labor is, not just the wages, but the insurance and benefits of the cost of that labor to operate that equipment over that 3 to 5 year time frame. And that'll begin to give you a picture of the total cost of ownership for that task or that role. And also you're going to want to look at, if you're not cutting any hours or cutting labor, where is that labor being redeployed? What else is getting accomplished that you weren't otherwise able to do as a result of implementing this technology? The next thing you're going to want to consider after you've determined that there is an ROI is what kind of process or workflow changes are you going to need to make in order to implement this technology within your process. So there may be changes to the time that you perform this floor care activity. You're going to want to avoid heavy periods of activity, whether that's restocking activity, whether that's customer traffic. You're going to want to make sure that the environment is ready for an autonomous system to be navigating around the space. I'll skip down to the third bullet because it's related to that timing. It helps to segment particularly large spaces into smaller zones to give you that flexibility. If you aren't able to ensure that restocking is going to be done or that pallets are going to be out of the way in the entire space, you might be able to do it in specific zones. So being able to segment the space into different zones and have routes programmed or trained for those zones can give you that flexibility you need to make sure that the tasks are getting done as scheduled. The next thing you're going to want to think about is conducting work in parallel. A lot of times, floor scrubbing activities are reserved for the last task of the day, but with this technology, you really want to think about what else can you be doing that's related to the floor scrubbing right alongside or in parallel with the robot. So that could be your edge mopping, your detail cleaning, your pre-sweeping. You can do that right ahead of the machine, so you're really getting two tasks accomplished at once. Finally, you're going to want to look at the way that you program the machine, the robotic equipment to perform this task. You're going to want it to do it in a logical and orderly process. This is going to aid with other employees in the area or new employees starting that haven't seen this technology. It's going to really help them understand and be able to predict what the machine is going to do. If you're sort of bouncing around from one area to another, as you typically do just to get the cleaning done, that may not be the way that you want to program these routes because nobody's going to really understand where the robot's going to go next. I'll go on to the next slide to talk a little bit more about cross-training multiple operators. When we talk about collaborating with the technology, the training isn't just for the employees that are responsible for cleaning the floors, like the janitors. You're going to want to introduce this across the board to all employees that are sharing the space with the robot so that they're familiar with its operation, they're not intimidated to work around it, and they really understand that it is going to see them and react to them, and that it is safe to work around that equipment. And that's also going to include ways to help the autonomous equipment operate more efficiently, whether that's clearing a path or assisting it if it gets stuck. You're also going to want to identify the operator and assign ownership to them. One of the things that we've seen is a hesitancy to adopt this technology because the expectations and rules aren't clearly identified at the onset, and as you can imagine, people might be weary of job loss or that responsibility is going to be taken away from them. So as long as that's communicated at the beginning that this equipment is still going to need to be prepped and maintained just like the manual machines have been in the past. It still needs to be filled and drained and cleaned. So that role needs to be transferred to somebody, and somebody needs to have ownership over that. So communicating that from the beginning helps to alleviate some of those concerns that the automation isn't necessarily going to equal a job loss, that operator is still going to be necessary, and they're going to be the ones making the decisions on where to clean, when to clean, and really how to operate this machine. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Kelly.
Thanks so much. So I actually, based on your presentation, have a few follow-up questions for you, and also if there are any listeners that have questions about anything that Paul has discussed, feel free to type those into us and we can filter those questions out to him. First off, your presentation mentions the reorganizing of cleaning tasks to work around some of these technology developments. And I noticed, I heard you talked about working in parallel. For example, you mentioned pre-sweeping, in front of the robotic machine, so you're accomplishing two tasks at once. Can you provide some other specific examples of tasks that a custodial technician could complete alongside equipment like this?
Sure. So one of the reasons why we suggest, just to take a quick step backwards, one of the reasons why we suggest that some of these tasks be conducted in parallel is to ensure that the environment is sufficiently prepped for this equipment. Just like you would pre-sweep the floors before you run an auto scrubber, you don't want to be sucking up any shrink wrap or anything like that that's going to clog the machine. You want to ensure that the environment is in some degree of, has been prepped to some degree before the machine is run. So by encouraging managers to assign tasks that are in the general vicinity of where the machine is going to be operating, it helps to ensure that those floor spaces have been prepped and are free of debris. And so some of those other tasks that we would suggest be conducted in parallel, you mentioned the pre-sweeping or dust mopping of the floors, edge mopping and spot cleaning. That's typically a time-consuming task, and it really gets the operator out there in the same environment alongside the machine. A few others could be cleaning of office spaces, picking up trash, anything that really gets them out on the floor space that the machine is going to be operating is the goal of why we recommend that.
Okay, great. And then do you have any other strategies for, optimizing efficiency for, a facility manager, BSC, who might be workloading this equipment alongside other employees?
Sure. So a lot of times, as I mentioned, the floor scrubbing isn't anywhere near 100% of the tasks that are assigned to that employee during their shift. It's substantial enough, but there are other tasks that need to be performed. And so one of the things that can be done to increase efficiency is to really take a look at the schedule of those tasks and how they're laid out. And a lot of times, if those can be reorganized in a way that allows the autonomous technology to operate more quickly and more efficiently, in that the environment has been prepped and you aren't having to wait for things to happen in order to kick it off on the next route. Any changes like that can help increase the speed and efficiency of the work getting done. And so when you look at how many tasks are assigned to that employee and how they're laid out, if they're having to bounce around from one side of an environment to another, stop what they're doing to go do something else, a lot of times we can look at that and create some efficiencies by reorganizing those tasks in a more logical progression of tasks, so that the machine can ultimately operate more smoothly and more efficiently.
Okay, great. We actually do have a question that came in from one of our listeners. He's wondering about the practicality of using autonomous floor care equipment in an office space that might have probably a few more obstacles, such as desks and furniture. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So yes, with extremely dynamic environments such as offices, there's likely to be tighter spaces. This equipment is going to function, it's going to do its best in larger, more open spaces. So in regards to office spaces, if you have long corridors, hallways, that sort of thing is really where this technology is going to present the most value at this time. Tighter spaces, cubicles, smaller offices, that sort of thing, it's really, there's really a need for, where there's really a need for human workers to get in there and move things around. That's not going to, the autonomous technology is not going to provide as much of a value there, because it's not going to be able to move those things around, move things off to the side. While it can go around certain things, the best environments are going to be open, more open hallways and corridors.
Okay. And then I have a question for you myself, and Bill, I don't know if you want to chime in on this one also. We talk a lot, because we cover floor care a lot in CMM, and we have different flooring types. They have different types of cleaning requirements, different types of products that we would use depending on the type of floor and, different ways to take care of them. So does robotic or autonomous equipment address this variety in how floors are maintained? And if not, do you think there's going to be any movement that would take the technology in that direction at some point in the future?
Well, I think To an extent, it does. Just to give you a bit of an idea of how our technology works. So the technology that we integrate into the autonomous equipment that we have in the market, we work with the OEMs that manufacture that equipment. So any brushes or floor care equipment that can be currently installed on that equipment, whether it's brushes, pads, diamond brushes, all of those different products can still be used on the autonomous equipment. So there is a way for you to sort of tailor this technology to your particular floor care needs. And one other thing that's worth mentioning as well is the differences in the approach to floor care. At times, depending on the environment or the condition of the floor, additional floor care, additional passes may be required. When you think about polished concrete floors, for example, you may want to spend extra time going over that floor several passes to bring that level of shine up. And that's where I think another place where autonomous technologies can really provide value, because that's a very repetitive task, having to go over that same area, that same high traffic area over and over again. And so with these autonomous technologies, it's easy to put on the appropriate product for that task, and then have the machine go over that over and over again until you're satisfied with the quality of clean.
Kelly, if I may, to Paul's point, the common denominator here, I think, with in general floor care, regardless of the flooring type, is we're basically washing the floor. On a daily basis, that often involves a neutral floor cleaner. With some equipment, we have more of the engineered water involved with that, depending on the soil loads. So I see this as certainly a viable option out there to address most of the floor care issues. But again, to Paul's point, when you have the variations, such as polishing concrete, or you have a particularly heavy soil load area, that's where that technician comes into play, in my mind. You need someone there to kind of make that judgment call as to what are we going to ask this machine to do today. We have one of our customers was an early adopter of this, was a school district, and he was faced with retirement, and because of budget constraints, he wasn't going to get that person back. So he saw this as an opportunity to still maintain a high level of service. So they actually use an autonomous scrubber. Again, to Paul's point, it really takes care of the majority of the hallways, while the technician kind of sets it up, gets the area ready for it, sends that machine on its way, then the technician goes and takes care of the classrooms. So I see this as something that's working in conjunction with a good operating cleaning system, as opposed to necessarily just replacing people. It's just another way to address productivity issues, to maintain a higher level of cleanliness within the facility, but we still need that human interaction, I think, to really make sure we're achieving the ultimate results.
Right. And
Absolutely.
I think, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just agreeing. That's a very good point.
Yeah, I know that one of the main questions that we get over and over again is really how to do more with less and optimizing our staff. So I think the point that Bill just made just really helps to address that for those of our listeners who've been asking about that.